Hey folks, welcome to another edition of the Skift podcast. This is a new mini series that I'm doing called How I Travel, where I'm interviewing, for now, people in the Skift ecosystem, intimate, detailed conversation on their travel habits as a lesson into some of the larger issues in the travel industry, but also very much sort of focused on what are the needs of the modern traveler today and potentially some lessons for the travel industry, but also just a very interesting listen. So for the first episode, I interviewed Colin Nagy, which I hope you listened to. It's a fascinating conversation. He's a longtime columnist at Skift. And for the second episode, I wanted to interview somebody I've known for way too long, probably, in my life. Jason Clampet, who's my co-founder of Skift. We have worked together now for coming up to maybe 13 plus years at this point, Jason, right?
Feels like 15.
Yeah. We've grown old together, and so have our kids, and so has the company. And I've seen, I guess, up close your travel habits over the last 12, 13 years. And so I wanted to dig into some of the aspects of how you think about when you travel, both for work, personally, with family, and your personal travel philosophy. So one of the things that I was thinking about before we started this conversation is it seems to me that you're a very unfussy traveler. I mean, that's generally maybe your personality as well. You try to be low key and have as less of a burden on people. That may be your personal life thing. I don't know if you've thought about it that way, but it seems like your travels are also unfussy.
That was pretty unfussy. I think I always tell people my philosophy. I know you're asking Colin his philosophy, and he was very erudite and sophisticated. My philosophy is it doesn't matter how much you complain when you're traveling, it's not going to get fixed. I always point out people at the airport who are freaking out at the front desk or the check-in desk or whatever to my daughter, and I'm like, they're not getting on the plane any faster. Traveled, it's be slow, be casual, don't freak out about anything, and just take it easy.
And so, where do you think that attitude has come from? Is it an attitude of this is how you grew up and this is, or is this a result of I've seen everything and it's just better to roll with the punches, or is something that you think that you sort of came in with because you traveled a lot. You started your first job was a travel agent, if I remember, like a student travel agent.
Yeah, I was a student travel agent for Council Travel, which existed a long time ago, and then it was subsumed by STA, which still I think exists in one form or
Still
another.
exists, yeah, it does.
Um, but I had, as a kid, we didn't travel in fancy ways a lot. We did what I later learned is called an obligation, where you just had to go see relatives every summer. And so for 2 weeks every summer, we'd drive from the DC area to Western Kentucky to Southern Illinois to Central Ohio and back home again. And my sister and I would be bored out of our minds for the whole 2 weeks. And so we just learned that, like most of vacation is about sitting around waiting for something else to happen. And so maybe it comes from that. It also, probably comes from seeing people behave badly in travel situations and not get any further. I know we all have seen the entitled jerk behave poorly and sometimes get his own way. But I've also remember in college I was traveling from central Bulgaria to Istanbul by bus, and we were at the border crossing at like midnight, and there's this really annoying Scotsman who had been a know-it-all and loud on the bus the whole time, and he didn't have his visa in order. And he got dragged off the bus, and he threw a fit and screamed at all the border guards. And when the bus left at 1 a.m., he was not on it. And so, if he had just been casual and been nice and deferential, I think he would have been on the bus. And so, it doesn't matter how upset you get. It's just you just got to take it easy.
Yeah. Let's dive a little bit into your personal travel philosophies. You do travel a lot locally. You're sort of one of those that is not your first instinct is that I'm going to go the furthest, the most obscure place ever. You do like to do sort of proximity travel, if you will. when you were in New York. Now you're based in London. When you were in New York, you and your wife and kid used to go a lot to sort of places around New York. And I guess in London you're doing that.
Yeah, yeah. New York would go to Rhode Island or the North Fork or upstate New York or Philadelphia or something like that by car, by train. I did a ton, and my wife and I did a ton of international travel when we were first married. We had a kid 5 years later, and then we still, I think, have done more international travel than most people. But I also love a local trip. I think it's takes the pressure off. It allows you to one, feel better about yourself in terms of carbon impact, even though I've got a huge carbon footprint. So really, it's kidding myself. But there is a lot to see nearby, and I think it also gives, especially your kids, kind of respect for the world around you. We live in London now. We have for the last 4 years, and I'm actually recording this from Edinburgh right now. And we came up on Sunday, and I've been working from the hotel, and my daughter is here with one of her classmates whose family is from nearby, and just exploring the city. And so for her to be like, oh, I get on a train and 4 hours later, things are transformed. I think it's still exciting to her, even though she's traveled a lot. I think that it allows you to actually kind of do some of those things that we talk about that are ideal about travel, like connecting with locals and, spending your money on big global corporation type of stuff and it's just almost by accident. It's not as if you're a really good person. It's just, it's easier because you have recommendations about cool local restaurants from friends who've been there or people, who work in hotels and you end up doing those good things we talk about with travel just kind of by accident that way. And you also get to really take advantage of word of mouth because, as I said, my daughter's here with a friend. We met with her mom who had lived in Edinburgh for 18 years, and she steered us towards this restaurant for lunch today and said, you have to go see this view. And so that's something that you don't normally have if you're hopping on a jet and going to somewhere, or hopping on a plane and going to somewhere brand new and exotic.
Do you like going to the same place? You like going and staying at this? I feel like you have a. I've seen you go, for instance, Rhode Island. You would go stay at the same place.
Yeah, we'll kind of do the repeat thing for a while. One, because it allows you to have longer term relationships. Like, when we went to this place in Rhode Island, there were staff that we had seen year after year, and they're like, "Oh, it's great to see you back," and makes us feel special. It's just a better experience all around because you're making these connections, which of course it's with staff, which is not, they are not becoming our friends. They're still on a payroll, but it's a good, I think, experience also for my daughter seeing something on a routine basis. But we'll also hop and go somewhere completely new all the time too. So this spring we went to Sorrento, and we had never been to Sorrento before, and there are a couple other locations we did for the first time this year that we had never done. Yeah, and so we mixed that up.
Are you loyal to an airline? Do you care?
I used to care when we were before we'd gone fully remote and lived in New York. I didn't live far from New York Airport. I lived in Hoboken. So flying on United anywhere in the world was the way to go. It didn't, United's product is pretty good. I know it's got some issues. Now that I'm in London, in theory, I could do that with BA, but BA is such a crap airline. The product is bad, but the digital product, the physical product, the customer experience. And so I kind of don't believe in anything anymore. I like JetBlue for transatlantic. They've got a nice product. They also have a day flight back from JFK, so I can get on at like the 8:30 a.m. and be in at 8:30 p.m. here, which helps me with jet lag. Nordic Air is great while it lasts. I don't know if it's going to last anymore.
You mean Norse Air?
Norsair, sorry, Norsair. Which is the corpse of Norwegian Air. They actually, I think, they use the exact same caterer as JetBlue, and JetBlue has a good caterer. So, that's good. And then going around Europe, EasyJet's not bad. Ryanair's not bad as
And
long as
you're
you
not
don't.
a snob like that of airline that you will or will not take.
Yeah, no. Especially if I know what I'm buying into. I'm not going to hop on Ryanair and not have paid for my bag and then throw a fit about it. But
And
you
also
know,
expect a first class treatment or whatever.
yeah, Yeah, they board from the front and the rear and disembark the same way, so it's faster. So they've got efficiencies built in. And if it's 2 hour flight, it doesn't really matter. So why not hop on that? If I'm doing international long haul, I'll want to be as kind of premium as I can get. But that usually is maybe premium economy if I've booked far ahead.
Or if you're going on a company trip.
No, I pay very close attention to how we spend our company money. So
Oh yeah, thank you for saying that. Um, when you book online, you're not loyal to like, I don't know, Expedia, Booking, etc. Again, you're sort of promiscuous that way, or you're booking through a credit card site. Like for instance, I have started doing most of my flight things, international flight things through Amex Travel because I have a platinum card, and that just plus minus if it's a little bit higher, but at least I'm accruing points and it's in a safe ecosystem of like customer service. I know what I'm doing.
yeah, I agree with the safe ecosystem of customer service. I don't book on an OTA. I use Kayak to find out where to do the direct booking. I'm not a member of with Amex or anything like that, and so I will book directly on the airline. I try to have a mileage number at all the major airlines so that at least I'm accruing something and that they know I'm not the last person they'll rebook if something goes wrong, and so I'll do that. But for now, I'll book directly on the airline's website.
Do you have a packaging philosophy?
Oh, packing philosophy?
Yeah.
Yeah, as little as humanly possible.
Yeah, you don't feel cold, so it feels like you can go any place cold. I remember when you were in New York, you would come wearing like a light jacket. I was like, "Isn't it cold outside?" I said, no, it's fine.
Yeah, or I'll layer. I spent time in the Midwest in Chicago, so with packing, I don't mind doing laundry in the hotel sink. So if I'm going to be gone for longer than 5 days, I usually won't have more than 5 days worth of clothing because after 2 days, I'll do some laundry in the sink,
Yeah,
and
there's
it'll be
certain kind of
dry.
people that do that, so I can do that. My wife won't do it, so
Yeah,
it's
same
like one
here.
of
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So if I go to a Skift event on my own, I will end up doing laundry. So when I come for Skift Global Forum, I'm usually in New York for 8 days, and for 4 of those days, there's laundry drying in the bathroom.
yeah. Or I mean, there's enough places nearby that you could drop it off if you wanted to.
Yeah, and so I always try to get everything in one carry-on. The only change that I've made in the carry-on rules is being in London here now, and all our family being in the U.S. Shipping is so expensive, and so when I visit New York in September or any other time, I will likely bring gifts that we will then distribute later in the year for the holidays or birthdays or things like that. And so, in
Interesting.
those cases, I will check a bag. I'll make sure it's insured and fly an airline where you can track it because you just save some money and then it makes your family feel good to be bringing these things, and they're always going to try to shove stuff in your bag to take back. So that way, I'll make the exception then.
Do you I remember you do this thing. I don't know if you want it. We can edit it out if you don't want it to be known. But like I remember you guys do Thanksgiving a day after Thanksgiving.
Yes, yeah, and now, yeah, we would do it on. My whole thing was for years. Thanksgiving was really really stressful on Wednesday because you want to make sure you have everything ready and prepped, but we're working on Wednesday. Like maybe you leave at noon, but you've got all this work to do, and then Thursday everything's closed, and then so you're just a stress bucket. So we started doing this thing when we lived in New York, where on Thanksgiving Day around 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. we'd go to the standard hotel in the meatpacking district, and we would have a Thanksgiving meal there and hang out there for 3 hours and have a long meal, and then go home and watch some football or watch Sound of Music and go to sleep. And then on Friday we'd have delivery from the grocery, and then we'd have a big feast and have some friends over, and they'd get a second Thanksgiving and we'd get a low pressure one. And so we actually did that. We do that in London now, mainly because nobody gets Thursday off. And so we did a big meal this year with, I think we had 8 people over, and instead of turkey, because the ovens are smaller in England, so you can't do a giant turkey. So we just did this giant fried chicken dish. And so friends came and brought stuff and traveled from all over.
Do you avoid traveling around these big holidays like I do?
I'd say, of course I do, but tomorrow I'm getting on a train to London. from Edinburgh. So, but normally I'll try to avoid it. Never
At
around
least train is
Thanksgiving.
better than flights and stuff like that. Yeah,
Usually it is, but yeah, we'll try to not travel on holidays at all. But it is harder being in the UK, in that kids' vacations are really set in stone, and you can't just pull your kid out of school to, like, go to Spain or do something or go skiing. Like, if you take your kid out of school without permission, you can get fined, and there's kind of no way around it. And so you basically just have to plan ahead as soon as you see the holidays. If you want to get out of town, you have to book those flights like immediately, like a year ahead of it, and be ready. And our colleague Kate is a master of that, and so she's tried to teach me and how to plan family vacations that way, but I haven't learned very well.
speaking of sort of family, how do you choose family destinations? Like, who's the decider, or does it vary? Or, now that your daughter is obviously older, she's a teenager, right?
Yeah,
Or almost
yeah,
almost an
17,
adult.
17.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, how
she's
do you
expensive
choose who
now.
you?
She's not a
Yeah,
discounted traveler anymore.
just like, well, that the philosophy went up pretty quickly. I think I don't know if you remember, since you've been in the industry, or at least wasn't it at some point, if you were under some age, you would get like half price tickets, and obviously all of that has been phased out. This is, I'm talking airline tickets.
Under two, if you're going to carry the kid, it's still free. But anything over that is basically full price now.
At this point, full price. I don't know if it ever used to be. I think it probably at some point it used to be discounted, but at this point it's almost full price. So I guess your travel philosophy has changed since you moved from, or at least the way you choose destinations has changed. Certainly the destinations have changed since you moved from New York to London. You just have more possibilities.
Yeah, more possibilities have changed. Also, we will take more trips of like 3 to 4 days. We haven't taken a lot of long trips, with the exception of a few home swaps, which we hadn't done until a couple of years ago. But
Interesting.
we'll do a 3 day trip to Paris, or to Netherlands, if any kind of Eurostar adjacent destination that's easy, or we'll fly a short trip on Ryanair or EasyJet to, we're in Dublin a few last month. We'll go to Italy, we'll go to Spain, we'll bump around, but we usually choose relatively short trips where we go and we do just a few things. So we don't plan a lot. We just plan to get there, go for walks, figure out where to eat, see one museum or two. We will, as you've written about with live tourism, we've done at least 4 trips in the past 2 years around live events.
Hmm. What type of live events?
Music. So we took
Taylor
our
Swift?
daughters. We did Beyonce in Paris. We did Kendrick Lamar in Paris. Diana Krall in Paris,
Wow.
and we did. And then in the right before Skift Global Forum, a friend and I went to Miami to see Messi play an inter Miami game, football game against Philadelphia Union. And so those, I can't remember the last time I like booked a trip around an event. So
Hmm.
I hate saying that you sometimes have your finger on the zeitgeist, but you did in this situation. So
And and do you for these trips, are these just short trips and you're coming back, or doing any
yeah,
type of?
usually just a 3 day, 2 to 3 day thing. And so we'll do another activity, usually like the day before. Like, we'll never fly in the same day as the event, because you never know what can happen
Yeah.
with the flight. So we'll fly in a day or so before and then leave a day and a half later.
You mentioned home swaps, which is a sort of ignored area of the travel industry. Few people remember this, but you and I remember this, that the progeny to Airbnb, couch surfing.
Hmm.
I don't know if Airbnb has publicly acknowledged that they got ever inspired by couch surfing, but couch surfing was the OG of sort of house swapping, I guess, or at least free.
Yeah, couch surfing was for people who couldn't afford houses yet, and so
Yeah.
it's just like an alternative to like hostels, I think.
And so house swap you do just through word of mouth, or you're doing through an actual organized website?
Yeah, some people do it through organized websites. A lot of people do it through alumni organizations at the universities.
Interesting. I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, and alumni organizations through work. My wife works for a large company, and they've got a Slack channel devoted to home swapping.
Interesting.
We did ours through a friend who lives in Copenhagen. Sorry, was born in Copenhagen, still has family there, lives in New York, and so she's got a group of about 4 dozen people where they swap things, and they live all over the world. So one summer we had actually swapped with her in New York. She had our place in London for 2 weeks. We had our place in New York for 2 weeks in the summer. And then 2 summers ago, we did a swap in Copenhagen. So we had a place there for 2 weeks. The woman in Copenhagen had our place in London. And that's great because it's, there's expectations are relatively sane. Nothing's going to get burned down. Or if they do,
Right.
people are going to apologize. It's not nobody's faking who they are on a home swapping because the woman we swapped with had gone to elementary school with our friend. So we knew we were pretty safe. And to me, I really like the experience of being in a location where you can cook your own food. You can, as I said, I enjoy washing my clothes on vacation.
Yeah.
You can relax, you can take a nap. You don't have to wait for a cleaner to come out of your room. But I also don't really enjoy, I think, I don't enjoy the Airbnb experience of showing up and the person letting you in isn't there and you've got dealing with all the nonsense. So to me, it's the ideal kind of situation of having your own place and you are living like a local because it's very, you've got to obey the recycling rules and the garbage stuff and everything, and you have to be nice to the
Plus,
neighbors.
you're
So
living
it's
next to neighbors and stuff like that.
yeah.
Um, since I happen to again know you for a long time, you and your wife, and you talked about food, and food is just such a central part of your life. And I know this is, I mean, all of us have to eat food, but sort of in in a way that you know the restaurant scene in general. You and your wife are very attuned to it. You eat well, as in healthy, delicious food. And again, you will go high and low. It seems like, well, you tell me, I'm putting words in your mouth, but you will go high and low both.
Yeah.
Like I can't go high. I have no sense of high, like high end cuisine. So I just stay in the low to mid tier. But you and your wife have a great sense of it. So as you travel, like how does food decisions come into play?
Yeah, we plan ahead on the food.
Plan ahead. Wow.
Well, on something. So if we're coming to a city like for this trip, we had two of our dinners booked, and then everything else was just we'll figure out what it is when we're there. So like the restaurant we went to last night is a place in a new town in Edinburgh called Noto, and but when we mentioned to the bartender at the hotel we're staying at that we had been there, it kind of flicked a switch for him. He's like, "Oh, you guys aren't a bunch of chuckleheads." And he goes, "Oh, I know the person who works there. Say, John at Glen Eagles said to say hello." And so that always works. But then a lot of stuff we discovered just by walking around the city. And so when we were in this town in Italy this spring, both of the places we went to dinner, we discovered when my daughter and I were out for a walk, and we're like, oh, "This looks really good. It's a nice location. Doesn't seem crazy," and that's always helpful. But yeah, we go high and low, and probably go too high sometimes, but always try to focus on non-chains when we can. Just like most people, but it gets harder.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like non-chains is a general good sentence for all your philosophy.
Most of the time, except hotels. I rarely, I'm at an independent hotel right now, but it's a rarity. But I've gone fully into the Marriott Bonvoy world,
You
and
have. Okay.
yeah, and
Why? And
it's
is that because of age, or
no,
just because you have points?
it's a consistent product. It's got points, and they have something at every level. Like Alan Wolinski, who writes the Daily Lodging Report for us, he and I joke about our dream hotel is a very clean courtyard. And they're just it's a quality product, and they've the buffet's not bad in the morning, and they're never going to screw you over with price. I also do like a nice 5-star hotel, and Marriott has those too. And the points are great, so I travel for work, and then once a year, I can use the points to go to a place nice. Like last year or a couple of years ago, Flora and I took a trip through from London all the way down to Rome, and we stayed at Moxie's along the way. And
Interesting.
Moxie is, Marriott won't say this, but it's their version of a youth hostel. It's so, it's basic, and they're like, oh, it's hip, the bar's cool. It's like
It's trying too hard, in my
yeah,
opinion, but
it's a
yeah.
slightly elevated youth hostel, but it's good. It's a great product. But then we had that didn't add up all the points, but we had a bunch of points from that and other to then book a 3 night stay at a JW Marriott in Venice. And so for the family, so you take the points you do for work, you trade it in. There's a great story. I think it was in Sports Illustrated before Sports Illustrated folded about what basketball and baseball writers their loyalty tricks, because they stay at more cities than like an NFL writer would, who are mainly in major cities like baseball. You're like in random St. Louis or Kansas City or this or that. And they all of them were Marriott members, because they had gamed all the system, and they knew, they would actually check into a different hotel every night even though they're in the same location for 3 days, because that counted towards stays, which then helped bonus points. And then they're gone for 5 months, 6 months of the year, doing reporting, and then when they come home they take their spouse to the Maldives for 2 weeks with all the points they got. So I was like, hey, if it works for these guys, I think they you know
Yeah.
I I don't have we don't have fancy salaries of major CEOs, but we've got at least well paid sports writer salaries.
One of the other things that I've noticed over the years with you is that you are very attuned to usability at hotels, like the plugs where they are, the
The
showers where they
hooks,
are,
the
and
hooks.
it annoys the shit out of you. I don't know if that's a word we can use on this podcast, or hooks.
It's our podcast. We can say anything we want.
Yeah. So I guess, you're not Colin, you're sort of anti-Colin in many ways, but you have elements of Colin on the usability part. What's your favorite pet peeve these days?
Hooks. Still, it's hooks, and it's places to hang a towel in the bathroom.
And they
I think
are being phased out because these days, because
no, they just don't. They just don't think about it. So they will go to the trouble of creating signs and having them printed up saying we care about the environment. So if you want us to change your towels, put them on the floor. If you want to have them, put them up on a hook or a rack, and there's no rack and there's no hook, or there's one hook and they have two robes on it, and you've got three people are using the bathroom, and so the misdesign of hotel bathrooms when it comes to hanging things will never cease to astound me. So that's the major thing. Secondary thing is lighting and being able to turn things off, which seems so simple, but it
yeah,
isn't always. And
yeah, the fancier the hotel, the harder it is. It seems like
if it's a design hotel, something where things are supposed to be cutting edge or whatnot,
yeah.
good luck like not breaking a toe
Oh my God.
on something because you can't turn the lights off. So that's the
Yeah, the worst that for me is like, I there's still some, and this is true in Europe mainly. Like you have to put your key card in,
oh yes,
and
yeah,
like half of the time, like you miss the whether you should put it in or not, or you take it out, and then you realize, oh, the
yeah, and the
whole
door's
the whole
closed,
place is
and
dark.
the door's closed and the lights are done. You can't make it back to the door and figure it out. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
embarrassing.
In terms of how you sort of enter a place the first time you've come into a place the first time, for instance, you arrive. Like for me, it's I'll definitely try and get into a place and sort of walk around. If it's I mean, generally safe area, I would stay in a safe area. Why would I stay in an unsafe area? But like for me, getting bearings is walking around, figuring out where I'm going to get my coffee or tea or something like that as a way to then navigate a place. Do you have something similar as you think about getting into a new place?
Yeah, well, walking around is what I always do, and usually I'll walk in a destination more than anything else. And of course, bigger destinations, call for different stuff, but I'll walk as much as humanly possible. One to get coffee or just see what's down that hill or around that corner. It gives you a sense of what's around without having everything prescribed to you. And I think it's really the only way to experience a location. After walking around a bit, taking a tram and going a little further, and then maybe coming back by foot, I don't hesitate to take a taxi when necessary. Usually, if I arrive in a place by plane and there's not a really easy way to get in by train, like there is in London, or from JFK, it's easy now. I'll likely take a taxi, especially when there's more than one of us there. But take the public transit back to the airport as frequently as possible, usually because it's just so much faster. But getting familiarized with the location, it's where can you get a coffee, where can you go into a corner store to get some sparkling bottled water and take it back to the room, or fresh juice or things like that, so you can have things in the fridge or in an ice bucket. Is, yeah, definitely the first thing I do.
Do you rate the, what is it called these days? The thing in the hotel room, the
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 mini bar.
pantry, the mini
Yeah,
bar?
no. When I was a kid, we would stay when we stayed at hotels. My father's thing that he always said was, "If you touch the mini bar, I'll break your hand." Just because he's like, I'm not going to pay
Expensive. I know, yeah.
$17 for Pringles, and so I usually stick with that philosophy. I despise the hotel where they have got things sitting, and if you lift it out, it charges you automatically.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Oh
sometimes
my God, yeah.
I'll ask them to turn it off. I'll say, I'm going to use this for my own thing, so please disable it. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, moving on to your favorite part of the industry, tours and activities.
Oh, great.
Yeah, as in, I guess you talked about, like, you travel for these music things, but in general, if you're not traveling for a specific event, do you buy beforehand, or would you almost always book it during the trip, or last minute things?
When I do book, I book during the trip because you look at the weather, you look at how people are feeling, and then you go for it. So, like, if you're going to go on I remember the most recent kind of really cool tourism activities thing I did was with my daughter in Tulum, in Mexico. We just walked down the beach to a stand where they were selling, tours of the cenotes, the underwater caves where you go swimming and snorkeling, because it was a beautiful day. And so we're like, oh, this is what we want to do. So we did that. We're there. It's nothing we would have booked ahead, because who knows if when you get there you're feeling tired or jet lagged or sick. So that always works for me. And then also, sometimes you don't know of what the activity is until you get there and just really want to do it. And then sometimes the activity is a hack. So I used Get Your Guide twice within the last year and a half, because I wanted to go to the top of the Reichstag in Berlin, and all the tours were booked. But if you did a high tea at the top of the Reichstag, you could get in and then have the same thing as a tour and walk around. And so we paid like 25 euros each and had coffee and tea and champagne or whatever, and then could tour it. And then at the Vatican, they do a happy hour at the Vatican, which
Oh,
hilarious.
interesting. Yeah.
And so it's like right in the center where that kind of like blown up globe is. And you go and you get in, you don't wait in line, you go in like at 6 p.m. They serve you wine and cheese and some chorizo and things like that. And then after 30 minutes, they let you go straight into like the main rooms. So you don't have to go in all the like lead up stuff. And so you're cutting the line, you're not waiting and going through all the crap rooms and stuff like that. And it's like 20 euros extra, maybe 30 euros. And so
Mm.
tours and activities, things that are hacks, are things that we'll go for. But and then the other thing, this isn't necessarily it kind of is. I'm a huge fan in London of the ferry system on the Thames, which is packed with tourists for certain routes, but it also is something that people forget to do. And so, I recommend that as a main activity. And I've started to take business meetings on the Thames. And so, when our mutual friend Brian Alvey was in town a month or so ago, I met him at Embankment, and we took it to Battersea and just sat outside and had a talk and had coffee, and while all the site, we go by Westminster and we go by the London Eye and like all this stuff, and it's great tourist experience, but also local at the same time. So that type of stuff's fun.
One of the other things that you and I have both actually gone on a similar journey of our sort of taking hold of our fitness, particularly, I'm going to say, in the last 5 years, maybe. because the first 5 years or whatever, 6, 7 years, we were just busting our backsides trying to build Skift, and we had no sense of it. How do you think about? So I just came back from a long trip, as you know, a 6 week long trip, and I have my own thoughts on sort of fitness on the road. I've recently have lost a lot of weight, and then I've gained a little bit back, tiny bit back on this trip, but I'm still pretty, if I can humbly say so, proud of myself for persisting with a bunch of the habits. And so, how do you think about fitness on the road, particularly from sort of where you were to where you are now?
Yeah, I think, I mentioned how much I enjoy walking when I'm in a destination. I really like running too, as long as you can kind of figure out where it's safe and get a sense of the route. I made a mistake here in this trip, not remembering my winter running jacket, and would have loved to be running here at Edinburgh because there's hills and it's great and fun, and so I ended up just spending the time in the hotel gym. But I think actively walking on a trip is great, but exercising is an excellent way to see a city. And I think Colin, who was on the last podcast, was talking about running in Tokyo. No matter where you are, there's likely a good place to run. When we had our retreat in Morocco, I waited till the sun was a little lower, around 5 o'clock, and did a 4 mile run there. And just kind of the guy at the hotel kind of helped me map it out so I wouldn't get hit by a car. That's always helpful. When we come to New York for the Global Forum, I usually stay over on the Jersey side. One, because it's cheaper, and two, because I can run up and down the Hudson River path, and so go up to Edgewater or down to Jersey City, and it's much more peaceful than running anywhere in New York City except for Central Park, maybe. And so,
And
it
the
gives
food,
you.
I guess, in terms of food, and I know, as I said, as we talked about, you don't scrimp on food, as in like you really want to enjoy your food. So how do you sort of balance that part?
Yeah, I did have bacon. No, I'm sorry, beef lard chips at lunch today. So I can't say that I'm super careful, but I usually am. We will choose dinners, do a mix of light and heavy meals. So like we had a heavier meal at lunch today, so we're gonna have a lighter meal at dinner tonight.
Yeah.
And so, but often going to restaurants where you're focusing on the food, you're not focusing on volume so much, and so it's a portion thing. So we're not having a big unlimited breadsticks kind of situation at Olive Garden. We're having very limited
Well, good news. There's
breadsticks.
nowhere outside of US that ever happens.
Exactly, yes. So
Yeah.
there's some kind of natural limiting that happens here.
You know what? This is the one thing I've learned. Outside of US, you ask them for a napkin, they will give you one napkin. They will
Yes,
never give you anything more than one napkin ever.
yes.
It's like eating the most greasiest food humanly possible, and they'll give you one napkin. And we're here with kids, and they'll still get one napkin.
Yes, yes. Well, remember the lamb shoulder place we ate at in Morocco, where we were literally almost eating on our laps with our fingers. Delicious, salty, grease covered thing, and we had to ask for napkins 7 or 8 times because every time they would bring like the one square one, which just would soak up the fat as soon as you
Yes.
touched it. Yes.
Yes, yeah, I remember that. In many places in Morocco, they just give you like cut paper as opposed to actual napkins as well. So I've seen that. How much This is interesting instead of how our travel habits have changed. How much does Google Maps define your local travel? For me, it's almost, I would say, like if you're not with a plan, then Google Maps will basically almost 100% take up my, like wherever reviews, etc. Do you care about reviews?
No, I won't. I look at both Apple Maps and Google Maps. I don't look at the reviews, just because Yelp is random enough, but those are so random, and the destination
And
by
Yelp is only
destination.
US too, and very little
Yeah,
outside of US. Yeah,
yeah. Like in Europe and the UK, the default kind of substitute for Yelp is TripAdvisor on Apple
yeah,
Maps, for instance,
interesting. Yeah,
and
yeah.
so and that's not useful much either. And so because we all know of the places where we're totally fine with things, and then they've got all these terrible reviews just because they didn't get bottomless breadsticks or something. And also, if you are looking at reviews of a restaurant in Italy and all of the Google reviews are in English or all the Apple reviews are in English, don't even go there. And so that's a way I do use it. I'm more, I always use the maps for navigation. I use transit maps when I want to get around. The city mapper is great for figuring out the best ways to and from everywhere. All across Europe, city mapper is good. It'll tell you, sit at this end of the train because that's closest to the exit you want to go to. And so my daughter is like such a City Mapper stan, and so she sees me using a different app, and she's like, "Why are you not using City Mapper?" So I kind of like she's beat it into me.
Yeah. Um, Language barriers in travel. Are you like, for me, I was 6 weeks away in Morocco, just came back. It's like the first few, I'm gonna say the first week or 2 weeks, I was always hesitant, and then like obviously I'm in this destination for a long time. By the end of it, it's like I can order anything and go into any situation and be fine. Do you use translation apps?
I do, especially when I'm planning something like if we're trying to get a reservation at a restaurant, I want to make sure I'm looking at the instructions correctly. In person, when we're in countries like France or Spain or Germany, I like to say I have restaurant French or restaurant German or restaurant Spanish, where I can ask and say please and thank you and get a sense of what's what on the menu just through experience. I will look some stuff up. My wife speaks Spanish, French, and some Italian. My daughter speaks Spanish, so I kind of
So
travel
you're
with
covered
translators.
in the
I've covered
European
the
and the
South.
colonial world, and the
Yes,
colonial world
yes,
that Europe bequeathed on the world.
exactly, exactly. So thank you for the 17th century global spread. But in other places, I have started using apps on the iPhone for live translation. A couple of years, a year or so ago, we were in a taxi in France, and my wife wasn't there, and so I was just having a conversation with the guy through the app, and it was great because it kind of he liked it. So it was his idea because he was like, "Oh, let's just just started pounding on it," and he was just then asked. He went beyond asking us about where we were going. It was like, "What are you doing here? What have you thought about it? How frequently do you come? Like, do you have any family here?" It's like just kept going, and so I find that to be fun in countries where I have no knowledge. Like when we're in Denmark for 2 weeks, of course they speak a ton of English in Copenhagen, but sometimes it's just easier to use Danish.
What draws you to? You've talked to Copenhagen a few times. You in this podcast, but also you've been to Copenhagen a few times, right? What draws you to Copenhagen, and why do you think it's such a great travel city for how you think about travel?
It's a high quality of life in Copenhagen, and you can get from one end of the city to the other very easily. The prices are higher, of course, but that's because fewer people are getting screwed along the way. And walking around, you constantly get ideas about how things could be better where you live. There was this interview that Rick Steves did last week with Lulu Garcia Navarro at the Times, and it was kind of a long retrospective about his career. But he had a line in there when she was asking him about how other people travel wrong or whatever, and he was like, "Oh, people don't really travel wrong," but he said that sometimes he gets a sense that people were threatened by other cultures that did things better. And he was using the context of people getting furious when they're checking at a hotel in Europe, and if they put the day before the month in terms of birthdays as opposed to the month before the day in the U.S. But in a city like Copenhagen, you see how people do stuff so much better in terms of transportation or how people are treated in terms of wages and how a livable city can operate, and
Family
what
friendliness, yeah.
the family friendliness out the wazoo, and it's like, hey, I could do this. It's boring after a while as a visitor, but to live there, it'd be great.
Yeah. What is your favorite city in the world to travel to,
I don't know.
or one of the top favorites? Because I asked Colin.
I don't know if I know yet.
Oh, you don't know yet.
Yeah, I don't think I know yet. I have a list of kind of evolving things. I really enjoy going to Madrid. I live in London now, but I didn't enjoy traveling to London, but I enjoy living in London now. I
Why
think
is
it's
that?
great. It kind of for the same reason as Copenhagen. Just the quality of life is so high. It's an easy city to live in. It's a very human city, despite the fact that it's so large. the streets. I used to think that the grid system in New York was so genius, and it is in some respects. But in London, there's kind of no grid, mainly because the city's evolved over 1,200 years. And so with that, it's like everything's curvy, and there's no like main, the Fifth Avenue kind of driving across anything. Any big roads are kind of ring roads. It's just a really nice quality of life, and there's a serendipity in kind of
The
everywhere you
history, sense
go.
of history. One thing's in London, like, oh, that building is 500 years old. Oh, that building is
Yeah,
700 years old. Oh,
yeah,
electricity was invented in this building.
yeah.
Like, just such random history that you walk around, particularly if you're in the central enough parts of London.
Yeah, I go jogging along the Thames River a lot, and I was listening to Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall trilogy about Cromwell and the 1500s. The first, not the Oliver Cromwell, the other one with Henry V. And I jog by, I don't know, 7 or 8 landmarks in that book on a regular basis. And while I was listening to it, I'm like, oh, there's the place where Thomas Cromwell's father beat him in Putney, and there's Lambeth Palace where Cardinal Wolsey was, and we live near Fulham Palace, which is where the Bishop of London lived, and so it's a
And
fun.
you're an audiobook person, I also
Yeah,
just remember,
yeah,
so
yeah.
so that
So
works out that way. Um, let's start wrapping it up. You're not a social media person. You've never really been on social media particularly.
was for a while and then eased off, and
Yeah, well, nobody can be more than me anyway, so you sort of gave up at some point. In terms of documenting travel, do you care?
I take a lot of photographs and save those, and I'll take notes after the fact, and then we'll
Or
within
actual
families
handwritten
we'll.
notes?
Yeah, yeah, and then with families, we'll share, photo albums of the of where we went, both within, you know, wife and daughter, and then with grandparents and things like that too. And so, yeah, a lot of photos.
And you don't feel the need to share publicly at all,
No,
like
no,
social media. Well, you're not on social media on a day-to-day basis to begin with, so much
no,
less.
yeah.
Are you Instagram?
Yeah.
I'm not Instagram, so I don't even know if you're on Instagram or not.
No, I'll follow and do some discovery on Instagram. So discovery is some food because that's you kind of can't ignore Instagram when it comes to food these days. But I can't remember the last time I posted.
How has your travel method changed between when you were bouncing around in Bulgaria in your, I guess, 20s versus now?
In every sense
In
possible.
every,
Um, no, I
yeah.
think the way this changed is, I'm now usually traveling with 2 other people who I really love. And then I was just traveling with me and sometimes some friends. So I have to take what they want to do into account. I think there are still things that I like doing then that I still do now, which is walking around a city and discovering, having a good meal from time to time, discovering something new. I think those will kind of always stay the same as core values. But I will hopefully stay in much nicer places than I stayed when I was a student, and trading a bed for. I remember I used to, when I'd go to youth hostels and didn't have much money, you could work a shift in the cafeteria in the morning cleaning up, and then you could stay an extra night. So I did that frequently.
Yeah, try doing that now.
Yeah, it's not going to work. Yeah. So
Yeah. Um, Again, I think I've known you enough. You don't seem like a souvenir person, like buying souvenir person, but tell me if I'm correct.
yeah, I think I remember buying first time I went to Istanbul. I thought it was really. I was there with a friend who. This is when we were studying in Bulgaria, and a friend. She bought a drum, and I bought a Killam bag, and we're like, "Oh, we are so cool," and we weren't because they were probably made in probably not Turkey, and so I thought that was really cool. That was kind of my first big I'm a cool traveler souvenir purchase, which was totally kind of a sham. I'll buy little gifts for my daughter. She likes snow globes. We'll get those from time to time, but those get a little boring after a while. Really haven't made it. The biggest kind of tourism purchase we ever made was at our honeymoon. My wife and I were, one of the cities we visited was Madrid, and there was an art fair kind of spread all throughout the town, focused on international contemporary photography. And we saw this one. Finnish artist. Elena Brotheris was her name, and really liked it. It was really cool. And then for our first anniversary, my wife bought one of her photographs, and so that we had actually seen in Madrid, and that's easily the best tour traveler souvenir I've ever been a part of, and I was just on the
Oh,
receiving
that's
end.
because your wife is very, very good at like
Giving
knowing what
things,
to
yeah,
buy and
yes,
giving things. I also know this part about her as well.
yeah.
Like I think she should, I don't know if there's a abstraction to like make a career out of it, but that's
I think
definitely
she has enough jobs.
yeah. What advice, this is the last question. What advice do you give your daughter on, I mean, she's a very worldly person, grew up in New York, with two multicultural parents. Now has, is doing her college, pre-college life in Europe and traveling with you, all the stuff you just talked about. But what is your advice or hope for your daughter in terms of travel?
Yeah, I think going back to the one of the first things we talked about is just patience and not freaking out about stuff. Just taking things one step at a time. Being very curious about everything that's around you, and not walking into a situation where you think you know everything because you've been to X, Y, or Z location, and so therefore you know how to do this. And so I like to think that she's in the other room not right now, so I know she won't listen to the podcast, so maybe she'll listen to me here. But walking into a destination with humility, and an eagerness to learn, I think would be my main hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jason. This has been fascinating. As I said, like everybody's different and this is the thing that I'm trying to get out of people is like how varied everybody is a different person. And it's just the fascinating part is how different and how similar we are in so many different ways. So thank you. That was a fascinating conversation.
Cool, great. Thanks for having me. Look forward to the next episode.